All right, well, let's call our meeting to order and get started. And why don't you go ahead and read that notice, Ms. Mester?
Thank you, Mayor. The meeting for which this agenda has been posted will be held pursuant to and in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3708.2, and state and local legislation adopted to allow for continued government operations during the COVID declared emergency. All participating members of City Council and other boards will be present at this meeting through electronic means, and members of the public can view the meeting at www.fallschurchva.gov/councilmeetings, as well as on FCC TV channels Cox 11, RCN 2, and Verizon 35. City Council work sessions are conducted to allow council members to discuss upcoming legislation and policy issues. The public is not generally invited to speak. Public comment may be sent to the city clerk at cityclerk@fallschurchva.gov. All comments are provided in full to the members of City Council and will be summarized at the next regular council meeting. And if you'd like, I'll do the roll call now, Mayor.
All righty.
Ms. Connolly?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Here.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter.
Here. So whoever,
Thank you,
I would just welcome to everyone to the Monday, May 17th meeting of the City Council or work session. We're happy that you all are able to join us today. I would just ask, if you're not speaking, if you could make sure your computer is muted so we don't hear too bad of an echo. But to all of you watching and all of you present at the meeting, thank you for joining us this evening. We do have a few different matters we're going to get to shortly, but thank you for participating in our meeting tonight. The first item on the agenda is to hear from Fairfax County staff on the West Falls Church Comprehensive Plan Amendment. And I'm going to ask Mr. Stoddard, who I believe is on our Zoom call, to go ahead and introduce the matter and introduce his colleagues from Fairfax County. So, Paul, you there?
And Mayor Tarter, I think we'll have Carly Aubrey step in to provide an overview and an introduction to our colleagues from Fairfax County who joined us in this meeting. Ms.
All
Aubrey.
right, Carly.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Yes, we do have a few people from Fairfax County staff. We have the Director of the Planning and Zoning Department, Ms. Barbara Byron, and I believe she might be giving the presentation, but we also have Brian Bateo, Michelle Stahl with the Planning Department, and then we also have Bob Pecora and Tim Coots with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation, if there's any specific questions. And then we also have Amy Friedlander with EYA. They're going to give a presentation as well. The staff report before you provides a background of the comp plan amendment for the WMATA and Virginia Tech piece. I'm not going to get into the details of that because that'll be covered by the presentations, but I will just add that city staff is reviewing the draft text amendment and we anticipate providing comments to Fairfax County by the end of this month. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Ms. Byron to walk through the Fairfax County, kind of the process and the timeline and what this amendment looked at, and then we can have Ms. Friedlander go over some of the more details of the plan amendment.
All right, well, thank you very much. And Ms. Byron, welcome. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts on what's going on next door, but welcome to you.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Tarter. As you know, we've been working with Carly and the rest of your staff for about 2.5 years now on a project that we're doing jointly. As stated, I'm the director of Fairfax County's Department of Planning and Development, and with me tonight were the people that Carly introduced from my office and from the Department of Transportation. And we appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to the council about our side of the development. Next slide, please. Okay, I was told you guys were going to advance the slide. Okay, there we go.
I
Thank
did.
you.
It's a little bit of a lag. Sorry, Barbara.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. We'll get the hang of it. So the portion of our study area next door to yours is outlined in red. We have called it by two different names. The rectangle that's at the lower part of the screen, we call the Virginia Tech property, and the rest of the property we basically call the WMATA property. As you know, it's the Virginia Tech property is developed with the Virginia Center that's associated with Virginia Tech and the parking associated with it. It is planned in our current plan for FARs that go up to about 2.5 FAR, and I'll get to in a little more detail later about what that is. And the rest of the property, the WMATA property, which contains the parking garage and the surface parking, we're planning for 0.96 FAR. Next slide, please. So in drafting our plan amendment, as I said, it took a couple of years to get here, but from the very beginning, we were looking at having a transit-oriented development, as you are as well. One of the major components of that was making sure that we had appropriate connectivity, not only to your property, but also to our residential communities that are adjacent to it. We wanted to make sure that we were changing from an auto-dominated development pattern to one that accommodates both pedestrians, bicycles, and the automobile. As would be appropriate for any TOD area. We have spent a lot of the time working with our task force and our citizens and our staff, making sure that the development proposal mitigates the impacts of the proposed development and that it incorporates the task force and citizen recommendations as we've received them from our outreach sessions. Next slide, please. So the WMATA property today is planned for only 720 dwelling units. Under the proposed development at the 0.96 FAR, the maximum development potential is a little over 1 million square feet, consisting of a mix of uses, 900 dwelling units, which would be multifamily and townhouses. And I would presume that Amy would go through this in a little more detail with you. A limited amount of office, which equates to approximately one office building, and very importantly, first floor retail to activate the pedestrian environment. Next slide, please. What we call subunit A2, which is the tech property, now is planned for either basically tech or a limited number of dwelling units and commercial development. In our proposed plan, it's planned for 2.5 FAR. That's a transition upward from our lower density up into your density, which equates to over 800,000 square feet of development, including 400 dwelling units. These would be primarily multifamily units. We also are including office space, again, about one office building, and institutional uses of about 160,000 square feet, again, with support retail on the first floor. As you well know, when we were in the middle of this and actually coming to the end of the line, we found out that Tech was not going to go forward with their proposal with us. We spent some time rethinking about what we wanted to do and realized that we really wanted to stick with the plan that we had been developing. We thought it was a good plan, irrespective of the user. And so the plan that you see today is exactly the plan that we had been working with Tech on. Next slide, please. One of the major components of the work that we accomplished during this 2.5-year period was to make sure that we developed an urban design concept for the site, or for both of the sites, consistent with a vision for a transit center area, TOD development. We wanted, again, to be sure that we were creating a pedestrian-oriented community, and our recommendations can fall really within 5 major categories. The first is we obviously have a huge asset there, which is the metro station. And so making sure that we had clear and convenient access to metro, it was essential to us, along with wayfinding and those sorts of things that improve the connectivity to the metro station. The second was that we wanted to make sure that it was an interesting route to get there. And so we set up a series of focal points along the way that not only created interest, but also direct you because the route is not totally linear, it curves. So we want to make sure that the way to the metro is very clear. Along with that, we thought it would be important to accommodate open spaces, and so we've created a series of those, as you can see conceptually with these red stars. Excuse me. And then in terms of the buildings, we're looking to have our buildings face tightly on the street in a more urban building form. And the last recommendation is in the current plan, or the last major concept. In our current plan, we highlight the parking structure for Metro. In this plan, because we are looking for a more urban environment, we call for basically trying to decrease the visibility of that parking garage and integrate development into it, perhaps as a liner of other kinds of uses or a building in front of it, that sort of thing, so that what you see is not primarily dominated by a parking structure. Next slide, please. One of the major elements that we spent a lot of time on was building height and massing. In our comprehensive plan amendment, we are going to include a height map, which is what we've displayed in front of you. And essentially what this does is it transitions down from the city's development towards our existing residential communities and towards the metro station. So we have tiers of height, and I hope you can see it. It's a little hard to see, but they go from a maximum of about 145 feet closest to you and tapers down as we head towards metro. Next slide, please. As with any major land use study, transportation is always a major component. And I would say we have, I missed parks and open space, I apologize. I think I've spoken to that on the previous slide, but again, they were major components. We've set up a series of parks. There are 4 parks that we're looking for. Again, this is conceptual, and when we work with a developer, hopefully EYA and its partners, we will see that come to fruition, but the comp plan sets out the framework for parks along the route, including 1 park at the corner of Haycock Road and the Metro Access Road. Now we get to transportation. So as you know, I'm sure you know from your work on the site and from the work that we all do on major studies, we worked with the developer's transportation team who submitted transportation analyses to us and to VDOT, which focused on the multimodal transportation network that we were trying to create here. And among the many components of that was not only improved connectivity to the existing neighborhoods, but also we've talked about at the request of some of the citizens on our task force, connections even across I-66 for pedestrians. As I alluded to before, wayfinding was extremely important to us. One of the activities that the county is going to undertake after this effort is what we're calling the Falls Church Active Transportation Plan, which is a multimodal plan for pedestrians and bicyclists to navigate through this area. Another major component of this plan is the parallel street that you can see in red, running kind of from the bottom of the page up lower left to upper right, which is the street that parallels Haycock Road, which is essential to us to improve the traffic circulation and issues. And we also are looking to have developers achieve TDM goals here, which of course should not be that difficult given its location at a metro station. Next slide, please. The culmination of much of that work is the intersection improvements that we have developed to make sure that the transportation system works better. As was indicated, Bob Pecora is on the phone if you would like more detail on these. But we spent a tremendous amount of time looking at how these intersections function. I would say that the intersection of 7 and Chestnut took maybe a vast majority of our time, but we also look at all these other intersections to look at how queuing and turn lanes and what's a turn lane, what's a through lane, how the intersections align, do they need extra lanes, fewer lanes, and that also includes, frankly, adding street trees to make the streets more pedestrian oriented. Next slide. We also spent some time at the task force and embodied in our comprehensive plan our environmental goals, We are looking, as we typically do, for the preservation of native species. We're looking to have native landscaping and additional landscaping throughout the site. We've set up reasonably high levels of stormwater management that we're looking to achieve, and we're looking for a reduction in pollutant runoff. With next slide. So as we said, this process has taken about 2.5 years. We did have a community task force appointed by Supervisor Faust. They were quite a diverse group, and I will say that at the end of the day, while we did have a vote for approval of the plan amendment, it was actually a split vote. So there's still some people who are concerned primarily about the transportation issues. I don't know that we've incorporated most of the issues that they were concerned about. There were some height issues and some other connectivity issues. Our TIA has not been 100% finalized by VDOT. We have a final submission in from the applicant to VDOT. We expect that it will be approved quite soon. But I think until that was completed, there was some concern among a few of the task force members that they wanted to know that answer before they voted for it. As I said, we've had many community meetings in addition to the task force meetings. And last slide, we are aiming to go, our next steps are to publish a staff report and to go to our planning commission on June 16th and our board on July 13th. So thank you for the opportunity to present this. And we do have staff, as I said, available to answer any questions you might have.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that very thorough presentation. Clearly, a lot of work and thought has gone into this plan. And I'm going to, if you don't mind, open it up to questions or comments from my colleagues on council. Would that be okay?
Of course.
All right. So does anyone on council have any questions or comments for Ms. Byron or her staff, colleagues? All right. So Mr. Lichtenhouse, then Ms. Hardy.
Great. Barbara, thank you for that presentation. I had to go back and look at my notes, and it was 2015 when you and I participated in that.
Not that long ago.
No, it's not that long. It was just around the corner. So that actually raised an interesting question, because that panel that you and I were part of back in 2015 focused on development Tysons. And I think one of the more interesting aspects of this comprehensive plan that you all are proposing is what looks like, a pretty low FAR adjacent to Metro. That's sub 1. What's the thinking there? I mean, is that a matter of just balancing out with what looks to be a copious amount of green space? What's the thinking there, which seems to be the complete opposite of what we see up in Tysons that's Metro adjacent?
Well, that's such a good question, and it's one we've actually struggled a little bit with. It is the FAR that the developers asked our board to authorize for plan amendment. So the board's authorization limited us to the 0.96 FAR on the WMATA site. It is lower than the FARs in most of our transit station areas, and certainly much lower than Tysons, but even, some of the other more suburban metro stations have higher FARs. But I think the major issue here was compatibility with the neighborhood. The village condominiums are kind of tucked into this project, and they were very active on our task force. And so it enabled us to provide a transition in density from the more intense development that the city is working on down through the tech site to the 0.96. So it's a very good observation, but that's basically the history of how we got here.
Okay, understandable.
But having said that, I think that, and you'll see it in a minute, hopefully from Amy, but I think that we feel that we were able to create a transit-oriented type development even at that FAR.
Well, I think, yeah, and it's a great point too. And when you have to look at the overall site, including Virginia Tech as well as our site, there is something to be said for balancing density across the two, even though it spans 2 different jurisdictions. So just because you can build up to a 5 FAR doesn't mean that you necessarily want to do it, right? And then one last question for you, and maybe this is something that Amy will answer, but I'm actually pretty excited to see the amount of green space and open space that you all have included as part of that comprehensive plan. Can you give us an idea of, what those parks and open spaces will look like? And if you don't, that's fine. But I'm just curious, are we talking athletic fields, places, or more leisure? Are we talking? What are you thinking there, Barbara?
Yeah,
Barbara,
nothing is as big.
I have a bunch of slides about that.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I would just say nothing's as big as an athletic field. but we are looking for a variety in open spaces, so I'll let Amy get into that. But I guess I want to add one more thing to the previous discussion or question. What's most important when we do these types of developments is really the first couple of floors of the buildings and how they activate the street and how they create the pedestrian experience. And so working to do that with this comprehensive plan made us feel comfortable that we could get the TOD kind of development even at this density.
Great. Well, I personally very excited to see this entire end of Falls Church and Metro adjacent property come to life. So thank you guys for your efforts. And Barbara, it's always great to hear from you again. So thank you.
All right, Miss Hardy, followed by Mr. Snyder.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Barbara, Letty Hardy, City Council. Good to virtually meet you. Thank you for joining us tonight. So 2 quick comments and then more of a question. So first, like Ross, it's really nice to see kind of coordinated transit-oriented development and hopefully connectivity between all of our parcels. Second, really appreciate the partnership between, again, city and county on coming to a solution at Chestnut and 7. I think that was kind of a hairy issue, and I'm glad we kind of came to a
while.
Yes, so I think hopefully we've come to a good outcome for everyone there. My question is really around kind of the sidewalks and the PED connectivity. So I think we also have a shared goal of making sure that it's going to be a seamless experience, whether you're a city resident or a county resident. We want people to be on foot and on bike, hopefully less cars. Could you talk to us more about, what you envision your streetscape to look like?
So I think it might be, I don't know if Brian or maybe Bob are maybe better off talking about the details. Do one of you want to volunteer? I can give you, I won't be able to give you dimensions, and they might be able to do that. But what we're definitely looking for are reasonably wide. We're looking for building zones against the facades of the buildings, which are the kind of quasi-public spaces, which might be the entrances to the townhouses, or it might be, places to browse in front of retail. We're looking for reasonably wide sidewalks, and then we're looking for planted areas against the street. We're also looking for some improvements, and Bob would be better able to answer this, along Haycock Road, where we are looking to get additional street trees put in. But if you have but any of the dimensions, they probably would be better off responding to.
And we don't need to talk about it now, but hopefully staff can coordinate on making sure that, whatever street safe standards we have, it connects nicely between one development to the next one too. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Snyder.
Sure. Thank you very much. We certainly put a high value on cooperation with Fairfax County. So have you all done a financial workup, like what the tax revenue generation would be from the site? And what is the acreage again of the total of the 2 pieces, the Grad Center and the WMATA?
So I'll ask Brian to answer the second. Oh, sorry.
It's about 31.5 acres approximately.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Brian. Could you say that again?
Yeah, it's approximately 31.5 acres between both sites.
Okay.
And typically we do not do a fiscal analysis with our planning work, and we did not do one here. Obviously, it would be positive. For one thing, the property is coming out of the non-taxable category into a taxable category, so it would be a significant increase in the tax rate or the revenues to our general fund for us.
Right. And will WMATA continue to own the WMATA part and the Grad Center part, or are they combined somehow, or?
Well, I think it's my understanding, but I would prefer for EYA or others to answer that. But I believe that they are selling the property for at least the townhouse piece. And then I think the city staff is probably in a better place to answer the ultimate ownership of the tech piece, because you have an ownership role in that now, as I understand it.
Mm-hmm. Right, thank you. And then to what extent has the traffic planning been coordinated between the 2 jurisdictions? I know that Haycock and 7 is a very, complicated intersection. and there'll be connections between the two sites and connections across the street, across Haycock. And has all this been coordinated to your satisfaction?
Well, I think I would like Bob to answer that because I think there's one intersection where we may still have some differences, at least when he and I last talked, which was sometime last week. But because the developers were the same teams, they had the same traffic consultants who work for both the city side and our side. We reviewed each other's work. We met with your staff. Carly, as you know, was the lead on this. There were many interactions at the staff level. And as was mentioned, Chestnut took a huge amount of time to finally work through. And so I think we're in good shape, except perhaps maybe one outstanding issue. But in general, I think the coordination has been achieved at this point. Do you want to add, Bob?
Yes, thank you, Barbara. Bob Pecora with Fairfax County DOT. The intersection that you're all talking about is the Route 7 and Haycock Road intersection. So we had met with the development team, EYA, and also their traffic consultant, Grove Slate, who was also working on your project. We also met with VDOT about that intersection. And one of the hangups was the dual lefts that was at that intersection that is existing today, and that's something that VDOT had requested that it be maintained in the future for the traffic movement onto Haycock Road. So that issue has been resolved as far as the retention of that with the development team. And what we were looking for is a level of traffic flow that would allow traffic to flow fairly, not easily, but it would flow in, like, say, the level service D or level service E. So that would give not as much of a delay or a very congested type of intersection. So that's something that we work with Carly, with Paul Stoddard, and to some extent with Wyatt Shields on that. So there's still some more work to do. Our traffic analysis, as Barbara had mentioned, is still in review by VDOT. So we're expecting their analysis and their conclusion in the next couple of weeks or so. And then we'll have that either their acceptance or if they have more additional comments on it. So, and the traffic analysis was more pertaining to the WMATA Virginia Tech sites, but it includes the City of Falls Church project in part of that analysis as well. So that way we'll have an answer or at least a conclusion from VDOT in a matter of weeks, and then we'll be able to tell that to everyone here on the council and also the city staff as well.
Okay, so just two quick comments. First of all, we expect these sites to generate much more pedestrian traffic already with our school, and you've got a significant pedestrian traffic already, but we expect a lot more. So hopefully the pedestrian and bicycle and non-car traffic is prioritized very high up in addition to the car traffic. And then we're also hopeful that the Route 7 BRT will be going up Route 7 and joining everything from Alexandria through Falls Church to Tyson's Corner. So we're hopeful that we can continue to plan and move that project forward as it skirts this project area. So thanks very much, and we look forward to working with you.
Great.
And we definitely did consider the BRT alignment stops, that sort of thing, as we were doing our analysis of this project.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mr. Duncan, then Vice Mayor Conley.
Thank you, Mayor Tarter. Thank you all for joining us. It's thrilling to see unified planning for these parcels, a realization of a long-held dream. I think the answer to my question is going to be it's way too early to tell, but anytime smart people are all in a room talking about this area, I wonder if you could just speak to the vision for what you called supportive retail or activating the space. Do we envision this area to be something that is like other retail activity nodes around the area? Is there something unique that we think might be offered here? Just, a beginnings of a conversation about what folks can expect besides the residential component of the developments.
Yeah, from our side, it's a little early because we don't have an actual rezoning proposal in. We've talked about conceptually the kinds of things we're looking for. It will never be a giant retail destination. It's small. It's not set up for that. But we definitely want to have some convenience retail. And again, maybe Amy has some thoughts about that as she goes through. But because we don't have an entitlement project in with us now, we haven't gotten to that level of understanding of what might be entailed here. Obviously, it's extremely important to us that we work with the developers to get that right.
I would just add before my presentation starts that Mr. Duncan, to your comment, we are obviously part of both development projects across this 40 acres, and so while we think that the retail energy will really be focused in the Falls Church piece, we are looking forward to the opportunity to create some, street activation retail, convenience, like Barbara mentioned, or other sort of neighborhood serving retail. It would not be a destination retail like the retail that's being planned for on the high school site.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Connolly.
Thanks, Mayor Tarter. I'll echo my colleagues' appreciation for unified planning and working together. Thank you for being here tonight. My question is, so you've drawn in 4 parks in your plan and a connection to the road that we have in your plan. How set in stone is that? Could it change? Might it change? Or how I guess it's really important to us that the road connects all the way through. And as you go through iterations with developers, might that change, or how can we be sure that actually, because that's a really key part of the whole thing from our side.
So I think we would share that. That's critical. No matter what else happens on our side, if that road doesn't go through, I don't think this would get approved. That is the major piece. The rest of it, I don't want to say this, but EYA could go away and another developer could come in. So the exact location of parks and that sort of thing would probably change as we go through an actual development proposal. But absolutely critical to us, our citizens, our board members, is having that road connection. So I can't imagine a circumstance in which we didn't have that.
Thank you. That's great.
All right. Any other comments? I've got a few thoughts or questions. So following up on the road issue, which is, as you imagine, very important to our development and the connection and the like. So could you elaborate a little bit more on what exactly you all are contemplating? For example, I presume you know where our road ends in Falls Church, right? So, and again, I presume the idea is that will seamlessly tie in on the Fairfax side to what we're going to basically produce and stub out on our side?
Yes.
Does it have the same sections? Are you guys contemplating the same section, street width and things like that?
I will defer to Bob.
Yes, thank you. So we've had a couple of concepts, and I believe at one time it's 2 one-way streets like it is on Commons Drive within the city of Falls Church. We also contemplated just a single two-way road, but that's the portion that's in the Virginia Tech site. So when it gets to the WMATA site, it's actually going to be a 2-way road. It transitions from whatever it is on Commons Drive to a road section that is more typical of just a 2-way road facility through the site. So the WMATA site is also proposing some other types of streets like Wooners and all that, but Amy can get into that as far as her presentation. But basically the connection of the parallel road to Haycock Road, we're looking for a good connection through the Virginia Tech parcel, whether it's two one-way roads or if it's a two-way road that will transition to what you have at the City of Falls Church at the Mustang Alley intersection with Commons Drive. So something we can work on the transition for that kind of road and whatever that feature might be through, or the cross section might be through the Virginia Tech site as a transition, and then as it transitions to the WMATA site.
Okay, and I think you mentioned earlier this notion, I don't know if you're referring to this road, the idea of having street trees and I presume also street lights and maybe bike lanes. Is that all what you're imagining the section that goes from Falls Church's development to WMATA having?
Yes, so the wide sidewalks, the street trees, streetscapes, Evans, or the EYA team has proposed the similar features to go along Commons Drive, or at least along Haycock Road, to be similar to what is being programmed for the City of Falls Church. So we're expecting, and we've written it in our comp plan draft, to have similar features that would translate to a streetscape that is consistent through three sites.
Got it. Okay.
Sorry.
Excuse me?
May I add that when we do the active transportation plan following our plan amendment, there may be enhancements to that, but I'm sure there will not be diminution of the bicycle and pedestrian connections, but we may add additional connections on and off site.
Got it. And so when is it contemplated the street would be built? Is that in connection with the development on the developer's nickel, or would that be something the county would produce earlier?
Our presumption is it will happen with the development.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so if, for example, Virginia Tech is delayed, as we know it is, right? Yes. That could mean that sort of middle leg could be delayed for potentially a number of years. Is that right?
Well, the way we've written the comp plan, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it says that road connection needs to go in with the first phase of development.
That's accurate.
So the leg that's on Virginia Tech, even if Tech weren't to redevelop because they have to issue a new RFP, or they're dealing with new folks, or reevaluating, whatever it is they do as an institution, we won't have to wait necessarily for that to come forth, because you are contemplating when townhouses or whatever start plopping down on the WMATA site, that this part of the road would have to be completed as well.
That's how the plan is now written, yes.
Okay. And getting back to BRT, I know I've been involved in some of these discussions. The BRT, I guess, having a stop right on 7, any possibility of it actually going to the metro where everybody wants to go, not necessarily, a quarter mile or a third of a mile from metro, but actually going to metro?
Yeah, we've just started doing the planning work from the Tysons area to the I-66, and we've expanded it to the segment of Route 7 between I-66 and Haycock and Shreve intersection. So it's still early in the process. We've been looking at a possible station along Route 7, but the new idea would also be some way to get it into the WMATA site, into the transit station area. That might be accessing directly through the Commons Drive or the Fellow Road to Haycock Road type of road. Still early in the process. We're still doing early planning on that. So it's a good idea. We will keep that at the top of our list to say, what can we do to get it into the station directly? So.
Got it. And I imagine you all are familiar with this grant as well, like the Smart Street technology. Have you given any thought to that?
No, not, we know it's between the city and Virginia Tech to do a Smart Street or some kind of demonstration project. So it'd be great if that portion of the street is built with if there's funding available for that, with whatever technology is being proposed or looked at with the street itself. So
I guess my understanding or thought was it actually went beyond tech onto WMATA, but maybe I'm mistaken as to the depth of the grant or how much area it covers, although certainly it would be in Fairfax County on the tech site. But I guess I would just suggest to you, it's sort of the early days, but I think it's important for us all to be thinking about that and how we might utilize this special funding that we're getting to do something exciting and new and different. So just as I've said to our own staff here, I think it'd be great for us to keep that in mind and really come up with some pretty cool ideas of things we might do with this money.
I think we would be very interested in that. It's our understanding, although I wouldn't swear to it, that it stops at the boundary of the tech property, but we'd absolutely love to work with the city on that.
Okay. I think that's all.
And if I could just speak to it. It does apply to the WMATA property as well. And we'll be having a stakeholder meeting this week to discuss some of the ways that the funds can be used.
Excellent.
Yeah, I would just invite you all to attend and participate. I mean, I think that now is the time to really be figuring out how we can use this money effectively to create some exciting things for our communities. Ms. Mester's got her hand up. Cindy?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to confirm that I've been in regular communication with Noel Dominguez when we were going through the General Assembly and Tom Versadny as we worked on the transportation piece, and we will be having the preliminary meetings, as Mr. Shield indicated, this week, and looking forward to a July-August fuller kickoff with all our stakeholders, which obviously and most definitely will include the county.
Great, thank you.
All right, so that's all I've got. And unless anyone has anything else, I want to thank you all so much for your hard work and for coming to share with us and cooperating and working together. I think we can all see how much better our projects can be when we get together early and often. So thank you very much. We look forward to continuing our conversation.
As do we, so thank you again.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, may we stay on and hear the EYA presentation?
Of course, and feel free to participate as well. If you have questions, just raise your hand. We're happy to recognize you. So unless there's anything else on this topic, why don't we move on to the next item? Mr. Shields, the CDA.
Thank you, Mayor. And from Ms. Byron's comments of just a moment ago, Ms. Aubrey, will we have a presentation from EYA on this on the West Falls planning area?
I'm here if you'd like me to present. If you don't want me to present.
Yeah, they are prepared with a presentation to go into more details of what they're proposing, but that's at the wish of the council.
Sure. Why don't you give us a brief overview?
Okay.
I have the slides up, Amy, if you just want to tell me when to advance.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. For the record, my name is Amy Friedlander, and I'm Development Manager with EYA. We are one of the 3 development partners for the WMATA site. My partners are Hoffman and Associates, with whom you are also familiar, and Rushmark, which is the development arm of HIT Construction. You can move to the next slide, please. So, as Barbara mentioned earlier tonight, we're representing the 2 different sites in the Fairfax County portion of the 40 acres. The Virginia Tech site, which was being developed in conjunction with the National Center for Smart Construction. Virginia Tech is still considering what they want to do, but Rushmark is still part of the WMATA project along with EYA and Hoffman. So I'm just here to tell you a little bit more about the vision and the actual what would actually be delivered with the framework that the comprehensive plan has developed over the past 2.5 years. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So as we've been talking a lot about over the past 3 years that we've all been working together, we are all trying to create this collaborative approach to a model transit-oriented development. So this is a slide that summarizes the vision for the entire 40 acres. And It represents, $1.2 billion of investment, 3 million square feet of development, tax benefits, new retail and office and residential uses, all of those great pedestrian and bike facilities that we've been talking about all night, new open spaces, affordable housing, and new partnerships for the county and the city. If you want to go to the next slide. At full build out, this is just a summary of the development that is enabled by the comprehensive plan and the approvals for the high school site. On the WMATA site, we're looking at office uses, retail, and residential. On the Virginia Tech site, the comprehensive plan will enable office, academic uses, as well as retail and residential. Next slide. This will also include significant investment in infrastructure, including the new Commons Spine Road that will go all the way to the metro. It'll maximize the value of the investment in the new Route 66 exit. Obviously, we'll incorporate the future BRT and bike share stations. It will create a new pleasant walking, biking path to the metro, which does not currently exist. A new grid of streets that will allow better access from Route 7 to Haycock, a new transit plaza and bus loops to improve ridership at West Falls Church, among all the other benefits that this project will bring. Next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about bike circulation, and I know that was a big question. You can see in kind of the greenish yellow color, those are the new bike lanes. So there will be bike lanes that cross the Virginia Tech parcel and throughout the WMATA parcel up to the metro, as well as shared use paths that will allow bikes and pedestrian throughout the site. Next slide, please. This is a slide that illustrates bus circulation. So obviously there are a lot of buses that currently serve the WMATA site. They will still serve the WMATA site. There will be slight changes to their paths, which actually will optimize their schedules and improve bus timing. And you can see how they will be serving the site on this slide. Next slide, please. So to zoom in a little bit further, this is a little bit about the Virginia Tech site. Obviously, next slide, please. It has, while Virginia Tech and Rushmark and HIP Construction have chosen to move beyond the original proposal, Virginia Tech is still looking to do something with their site, and they're regrouping and they're preparing to think of something new to do. And so one of the important things about this comprehensive plan is that approving it will ensure that Virginia Tech will be able to do what they need to do in the future when they figure it out. So as we talked a little bit about earlier today, they are committed to providing the street connection through their site. We can build it without disturbing the existing building. And so, whether it's built with the grant money or otherwise, it will be delivered and it will be part of the initial phase of the development. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this is an illustrative plan, kind of getting to a lot of your questions about what will this actually look like, and what will the comprehensive plan, what will our vision for what is contemplated in the comprehensive plan actually look like on the ground. We agree with all of your comments about creating a pedestrian and bike-oriented development, providing nice sidewalks and street trees and bike lanes and all of that great stuff. We're definitely all on the same page. We are working very hard to create that kind of place that everybody wants to see, especially next to such a valuable asset as the metro. So you can see this is a little bit older plan, but it's generally the concept in that there are going to be, in the first phase, there will be a multifamily building as well as the townhomes that are lining kind of the right side of the page. And then there will be a multifamily building next to the Metro, which we call multifamily building 2, which will be part of the second phase. And then there will be a third and final phase for the block that is north of the garage, if and when WMATA decides to allow us to develop that parking lot, which would include residential and office uses. Next slide, please. These are some illustrative renderings that will help us and the community really visualize what's in store for them in terms of this new development. You can see that we're really focused on creating those great places for pedestrians and people scale development, which has been sorely missing from the WMATA site for a long time. So we're very excited to deliver something that people actually want to inhabit rather than just get in and out of as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. So you asked about parks. I have a couple of slides about the various parks that we're contemplating here. This is a slide that just illustrates some of the linear parks that we're thinking about. So, one of the challenges of this site, which I'm sure staff would agree with, is that the parking garage is in the, worst possible place on the whole site and really makes it difficult to create developable blocks around the garage. It would have been really great if the garage were right up next to 66, but unfortunately it's not. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is create creative open spaces that generate that sense of place and help us deal with the kind of strange configurations and geometries of the site. So one of these is creating a lot of urban parks and plazas that might be linear, that might be, pocket parks that create that sense of like wonder and joy as you're walking to the Metro. Next slide, please. Oh, there's more illustrations of what that can look like. So, anyway, we're also including a dog park, which is something that we've heard a lot about. Dogs are very important to a lot of people in this community. And so we were very pleased to be able to deliver a dog park up to on the Haycock side of the property where you turn onto Metro Access Drive. This would be a wooded dog park. There would be a mixed use court next to it. So, whether that's a sport court or something relatively small scale but usable by a bunch of different sports or ages. And then the dog park is actually sitting in a little bit of a bowl in the open space. So hopefully that will help with sound and noise issues associated with the dog park. So it's actually a really great place for a dog park, and we're very excited to be able to deliver it. Next slide, please. Oh. Guess it's being slow. I can just talk about this if it doesn't want to load.
It doesn't seem to want to load.
The Transit Plaza is what we call the area next to the second multifamily building, but it will be a place for people to gather and share in the space, as well as I'm looking at my own presentation to see what was on it. Benches, as if Evan Goldman were here, he'd probably talk about the alley of trees that we're planning for it. It's really a place of high volume pedestrian movement to and from the Metro, and it's to create that sense of place and that wayfinding to get people to the Metro. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of great trees on this site, and we're excited to be able to preserve a lot of them. So there's a stretch of trees along the existing pavilions and villages where we're looking to kind of clean up and create a new open space use for that site, where we'll have trails or little exploration sections, or as you can see here, the little stumps that kids can walk along. But it's a great way to buffer against the existing residential and protect the resources that are there while creating a new open space for people to enjoy. Next slide, please. So I think that this is the last slide, and it just goes to show you this kind of comprehensive look at all the open spaces across the site that are, can potentially be delivered, from the open spaces on the high school to the open spaces on the George Mason High School site, to what could be on the Virginia Tech site and what is contemplated in the comprehensive plan recommendations for that site, as well as what we are actively planning to deliver and will be proposing as part of our CDP, FDP, and rezoning submissions in short order. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope that was helpful and not too lengthy, but I appreciate your time.
All right. Well, we appreciate yours. Let's go ahead and open it up. Let's go ahead and open it up to questions and comments from council. And again, if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. But anyway, are there any questions or comments from council? I'm going to ask one or two quick ones then, if nobody's got anything. So the structured garage, the currently existing structured Metro garage, is that going to be sort of co-op by some of these other buildings, or what's going to happen with that in the future?
Nope, it will remain WMATA parking for Metro riders. And we are working with WMATA to optimize how folks get in and out of the garage, but it will remain and it will be for WMATA park and riders. I forgot to mention, Mr. Steiner, I think you asked the ownership structure of the WMATA site. So Barbara was correct that the townhomes will be fee simple sale, and then the other buildings will be ground leased by the development entities from WMATA.
And also, as relates to your road, Ms. Byron showed kind of a more direct route. In other words, it looked almost like the hypotenuse of a triangle as opposed to the two legs. It looks like what you're showing here is kind of a, straight, then a 90-degree turn. Which is it? What is the plan for the road from Falls Church to the Metro?
So I will take a stab at that, and Barbara, if you'd like to answer as well. This is roughly what we've been talking to staff a lot about that connection, and we agree with them. We want to make sure that the sight line from the main road to the Metro is clear and visible. And we are working with them to optimize that. So this illustration is actually a little bit old, and the road that we are going to be proposing with the rezoning is actually a little bit more diagonal, as you're describing. So it's been an active discussion with staff.
All right, so we've got Mr. Lichtenhouse has a question or comment.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Thank you for that presentation. It was great. Again, I'll echo what I said previously to Barbara, which is I'm very excited to see the copious amounts of green space here. I think it's great what you guys have incorporated into it. For folks that may be watching or watch this later, can you give us an idea of the distance from the Falls Church City site, the edge of it, maybe call it between Virginia Tech and West Falls Church site, to the end of your site over there near that preserve, as well as the dog park? What's that distance like if someone were to walk it? Do you know?
From I guess from Mustang Alley to the dog park, I'd say that's probably about the same distance as it is from Route 7 to the Metro, which is about 0.8 miles.
Okay, all right. I think it gives folks a good idea of what it would take to get to some of that green space.
Yeah, I think each block between each street is probably, I don't know, it's a normal size city block, so call it between 250 and 300 feet.
Got it. And then the townhomes that you guys are planning, and maybe you don't know this yet, and that's fine. I'm just curious. Can you give us an idea of size of the townhomes and potential price range?
Sure. They will be our 16 and 20 foot wide units, so they'll be roughly 1,600 square feet to over 2,000 square feet, and they'll be priced likely starting in the 900s.
Okay.
So they are Metro proximate, so they will be larger and bigger and more. They're a little bit pricier than our Grand Park townhomes in Fairfax County, for example, but they're comparable to our townhome project that we're proposing just up the road on Route 7 at 7700 Leesburg Pike.
No, those are pretty big townhomes, which is great. That's great. And I do like the fact that we've got a lot of residential packed over there, which supports the retail component on our site too. So fingers crossed that all that comes together the way that you guys want it. But thanks for sharing this. Appreciate it.
Of course.
All right. Any other comments? If not, thank you very much, Amy. We appreciate your presentation you've just given us. Let's move on now to the CDA, the Community Development Authority. Mr. Shields, who's going to do that?
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. So Carol McCoskey and I will join together on this staff report. And what we want to do is just once again provide a quick overview of what a CDA is and what the thinking is on this site. And then Carol will get more specific to the petition that we're still negotiating the final details of the petition, and we expect those midweek in anticipation of a request for first reading on the creation of a community development authority at your meeting next week. I'll provide just a few quick notes as an overview really for the public, and then Carol can jump in with more details. To create a community development authority, it requires the property owners to petition their local government to create it. And the reason they would do so is to gain public improvements in a specific district where these petitioners reside. And then there would be a special assessment paid only by those who live in that special district to pay for those public improvements. There is no tax impact for taxpayers who live outside the district. Because the property is currently owned by the city, the petitioners for this community development authority, the West Falls Community Development Authority, up in the 10-acre site that we were just discussing a moment ago, the petitioners in this case are the future leaseholders of this property, and that includes Falls Church Gateway Partners, which is EYA and Hoffman, as well as their partners, the office developer and the senior developer. So those are the petitioners in this case. So I'll just talk about sort of broadly kind of three questions. Why would a developer want a community development authority? Why do cities approve them, and why do cities want community development authorities, and what is the market for them, for the bonds that are issued for a community development authority? So first, why would a developer typically want a community development authority? Well, they're seeking the public improvements, and in exchange for those public improvements, the petitioners then would be willing to accept a special surtax or a special assessment on their properties. And what that really allows the developer to do is to access a lower cost of capital that they can then pay off over the term of the bonds issued by the CDA, and it allows them to accomplish put in the infrastructure needed associated with their development. Why does a municipality seek a CDA? Well, in many parts of the Commonwealth of Virginia, local governments pay for public improvements to incentivize economic development. And so there are examples of this across the state where local governments chip in a share of the public improvements. One of the benefits of a community development authority is that it allows the local government to support public infrastructure, but to not have the taxpayers across their jurisdiction bear that burden. Instead, really just the property owners within that district bear the burden for those public improvements. And that would be the case here. And in addition, the city would not provide any backing for the bonds. So the bonds would need to be able to stand based on the future value of the development on this site. And that's the sort of a key point about the market for these bonds. Why would the market want to buy bonds for a community development authority? And typically the answer is that because they are a specialized municipal bond, they oftentimes do generate a higher yield, say, as compared to government general obligation bonds that the city typically issues. And typically the investors in these bonds are banks and sophisticated financial entities that know how to evaluate the risk and price it appropriately. The pricing ultimately would be, these bonds would be sold on the open market, and people would compete to purchase these bonds, and that's how the interest rate ultimately would be set. So let me stop there with that first that overview. We do have a map of the proposed district, and Cindy, maybe if you can just share that map. And this is the area that everybody's very familiar with. This is the area of the just under 10-acre West Falls development. And so only the property, the leaseholders in this area and the future condo owners in this area would pay the special assessment for the public improvements that would be built within that district. So now let me stop there and turn it over to Carol for more details on the ordinance and on the petitions that we're working through between our legal team and the developers' legal teams.
Yes, Council. So the CDA, what's before you tonight and next week is simply creation of the authority, the CDA. It would not be able to, your action at this time is not going to enable the CDA to issue bonds. That will require separate approval from you in the future. And any taxes to be levied will have to be requested by the CDA, and then you, the council, would vote to levy. And in this case, it will not be taxes, it will be a special assessment. A special assessment is determined upfront to be sufficient funds annually to pay the debt service on the bonds. And one of the advantages of that is it doesn't rely on the assessed value for how much can be charged, because the amount is set at the beginning when the bonds are issued to enable payment of the debt service at the interest rates and in the amount of issued bonds. In this case, the amended comprehensive agreement provides that the city manager will recommend that council create the CDA by ordinance, and the petition that needs to be before you to adopt the ordinance has to have some elements of the plan of finance. And because many of the details were left out of the comprehensive agreement, those are the matters that are being resolved today. And we have been discussing this with the developer. The attorneys have been discussing how everything will work to make sure that the bonds ultimately issued would be marketable. And so some of those details are still under discussion, but we are definitely making progress to a point where we can all agree on the language of the petition that will be signed by FCGP, the EDA, the city, and the office developer, so that we'll have more than 51% of the owners of the property. They will submit the petition to you. You all will adopt the ordinance to create the CDA, and then it will begin going about its business to adopt a reimbursement resolution so that the expenses can be paid, and to ultimately request council to approve the issuance of bonds. So that is where we are. As I say, we are making progress, but we haven't finalized all the details, and that is why we do not have a petition signed for you to look at tonight. We hope to have that next week, because you would need a petition in order to be able to adopt the ordinance. So if you have any questions, we do not bring outside counsel tonight. If we need to have a few further discussion of risk when we're closer, we will do that in a closed session. And then if you have any questions about how the CDA would work, we're happy to try to answer them.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for Wyatt or Carol? All right, well, that was fairly quick and fairly easy. Let's keep going then. We do have a closed session tonight just for everyone's edification. Let's go on to the next item. Mr. Shields, it sounds like that's from you as well.
Thank you, Mayor. And Carol and I will also sort of speak probably together on this one. So the question that the City Council has asked is if the emergency for COVID-19 is lifted, what is the transition period for some of the emergency measures that have been in place that have been sort of a normal part of our operations during COVID-19, but also importantly, which have been important for the business community's operations. So we wanted to just speak very briefly on this. This probably could just be a 5-minute discussion. Under the continuity of government ordinance that was adopted by the City Council, that provides for a 6-month transition period after the declaration of emergency is lifted. So it's been rumored, for instance, that it's possible that Governor Northam, maybe I shouldn't say it's been rumored, Governor Northam has signaled that he is looking at potentially lifting the statewide declaration of emergency on or about June 30th. And for the measures that we have in place for our virtual meetings and conducting our business in the COVID environment, we have in the ordinance that was adopted by the City Council allowing for the continuity of government a 6-month transition period. That's permissive. We could transition out of emergency mode more quickly than that, depending on kind of what the operational impacts are. And that's a discussion we can have with the City Council as we consider our, for instance, this meeting, how you conduct your work sessions and your regular meetings, and also how board and commissions conduct their business. With respect to our restaurants, the City Council approved an ordinance allowing more flexibility on sign regulations as well as parking regulations. The council approved the ability to allow outdoor dining as well as outdoor entertainment during COVID-19. And so the question is, if the declaration is lifted, how long do the businesses have to change their practices? In the ordinance that allows the flexibility for zoning provisions, there's not an explicit extension of 6 months like there was for the continuity of government ordinance. So that is one we're looking at. We could possibly just sort of take by inference the 6-month extension for one ordinance applying to the other and see if there's state authority for that. Or it's possible we'll come back to council to ask for an extension to give our business community a little bit more time after, or at least for the council to consider granting a specific transition period for our business community before they come back into compliance with zoning ordinances. One thing that's relevant to that, the City Council has asked staff to come to council with a proposal or a concept for allowing outdoor music, for instance, at restaurants under a zoning allowance. Right now, those types of uses are not permitted. And so what we're contemplating is a conditional use permit or a special use permit where restaurants are allowed to have outdoor entertainment under a permit, but that may not be adopted, before June 30th, in which case we'll either go under the 6-month extension of the continuity of government ordinance, or if we don't think that that's sound enough, we may ask the council for an ordinance to extend the transition period for the zoning waivers. So that's my report. Carol, do you have anything to add to that or any corrections to what I just said? And then we can get council questions.
I don't have anything to add at this time.
All right, thank you very much. We've got a few questions here. Mr. Lichtenhouse and then Ms. Hardy.
I think Letty was before I was.
Okay, Letty and then Ross.
Thanks, Wyatt. For the zoning kind of process that you envision to allow music, does that also cover outdoor dining and vending? Well, because I know we have some businesses that have spilled out into their parking spaces for that.
Under the sort of draft concept that I've seen staff develop, and at this point it's just kind of a concept with bullet points, it would address both the outdoor dining and the outdoor entertainment.
Because I think we would like both stay. Thank you. Okay, that's it.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yep. So I'll be a little bit more direct on that. I think it is absolutely necessary for us to permit continued outdoor dining and entertainment for our businesses, just because restrictions have been lifted in some cases. Consumer sentiment and consumer patterns are going to continue to warrant outdoor seating. And the entertainment piece has been highly successful, not only as a way to mitigate some of the challenges of indoor dining during the pandemic, but it's brought a different level of vibrancy to businesses that, frankly, if we shut that off, regardless of some of these restrictions being lifted, it's going to negatively impact them, I think, more than many of us may realize. And so I would request and request quite forcefully to say we need to do everything that we can to make sure that we permit the outdoor dining and entertainment to continue after this period is lifted by the state. So Wyatt, I'd ask you guys to do whatever we need to do to expedite that, because that is something that I think is an absolute must to help our businesses survive. In addition to that, wasn't there zoning flexibility around curbside pickup?
Yes, there was.
Okay. I also think that maybe not quite as much. I'm not as passionate necessarily about maintaining that, because not that I don't think that it's important, but because I don't know what that necessarily means if that is formally taken off the table. But that's also something that I think is important for us to evaluate. Maybe something that we absolutely need to make more permanent. These retail these retail consumer patterns have changed, and in some cases changed permanently. And so we need to change our zoning to accommodate that and help our businesses survive, because if we don't, we're setting some of these businesses up for failure. So I think that it's important for us to do that. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Snyder, followed by Ms. Hiscott.
Sure. I think we all feel the urgency to permit as much flexibility as possible and to support the evolution in business models for our businesses. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hiscott.
I echo the same sentiments. I don't have material information to add. I just want to make sure that I voiced my opinion that I too would really like to see this flexibility maintained post-COVID for the businesses and for the residents who really enjoy that. And so just wanted to echo my agreement with that as well. Thanks.
All right, Mr. Shields, I think you've heard. Let's get this squared away as soon as we can.
Okay, so council, I will circle back with staff. We are scheduled on June 7th to talk about the special use permit idea or conditional use permit idea. I will talk with Carol, and it may be, I'm sort of thinking out loud here, that for the emergency ordinance with respect to flexibility on zoning ordinances, we'll send out a note to council, but we may ask for a first reading to amend that ordinance to provide an X month transition period as well. Because if we get into June 7th, it's going to become well talked about that the governor's going to lift the emergency. And so the business community is going to have lots of questions for us. And so if we did have a first reading on that ordinance next week, then that would allow us to give the answer to them about the transition period. So maybe if I could just confirm that with council by email, but if there's not any objection, then we would bring that ordinance next Monday.
All right, Ms. Hardy. Do you have another question?
This, but post-COVID recovery. Is it okay to ask that now?
Yes.
So Wyatt, with the CDC relaxing masks for vaccinated people and kind of moving to this honor system, do we have a plan for what we might do for City Hall and kind of our local policy and then rec programs as well?
So we've been feverishly reading the governor's executive order 72 as amended on Friday afternoon. We're also talking to our colleagues across Northern Virginia. As we've done things, we've tried to be as consistent as reasonably we can with other jurisdictions so that the community, what makes sense for one presumably makes sense for most. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of variance out there in terms of how local governments are responding to the governor's executive ordinance, specific to, for instance, we were going to require masks if you enter City Hall. That is our policy today. The governor's order, on one hand, says that you should wear a mask in congregate settings. City Hall is arguably a congregate setting. But then it did lift the mask mandate for the public. So we have not come to a firm conclusion on that as of 5 o'clock today, but we will move very quickly. My goal is to have policy out for our facilities by tomorrow. And then and if council has any views on it, we certainly love to hear them. And then Rec and Parks, slightly different because much of their activities are outdoors, but they certainly will be changing their policies in light of the governor's executive orders, which are based on the CDC's guidance and based on declining case numbers, declining hospitalization, and rising vaccination rates.
I actually think it might be a little more straightforward with kids. I like the approach in the schools. So given that we actually have really low vaccination rates, the schools are still requiring masks for all kids, especially indoors. And so I think consistency matters here because I think some of it's behavior change, right? So if kids are expected to wear masks in school, it's worth us thinking about if they're in a after school class that they might be expected to wear a mask then too. Keep us posted. Thank you.
Mr. Lichtenhouse.
Yeah, that reminded me, I had a question come in from a couple parents related to recreational activities for kids. Going back to this idea of inconsistency. At Larry Graves, it seems that, and I don't know if this is Falls Church Rec and Parks that's requiring this or if it's Fairfax County. I couldn't answer this question, but there were some parents that were, I don't say concerned or questioning the fact that kids needed to wear a mask while actively participating in sports on the field at Larry Graves, and they didn't seem to in other sports and other fields. Can anybody speak to that? And does anybody know the policy? And is that a Fairfax versus Falls Church? Is it a Park and Recs? Is it a CDC? What is the guideline right now for kids participating in on-field activities like running around playing soccer?
So the city's policy for its soccer league was that we stated it as it is the expectation that players will wear masks. And that was a stricter statement than in our surrounding jurisdictions. And so, that's been our stance.
So that's just a soccer program thing.
That was, I think that was for most sports. Soccer is one that there was a great deal of discussion about it, and the way we landed on it, and it was controversial. There were some parents who were very passionately supportive of that policy, and some that didn't like it. But our view was that there were certain children for whom wearing a mask really was required, either because of their parents mandating it or because of situations at their home or their underlying health conditions. And so we believed it was more inclusive to have that expectation of mask wearing for participants in sports activities.
And is that the same guidance that's coming out of the state and CDC for kids' activities?
It's been a little bit. I think probably the city was taking a bit more of a stricter line than certainly the state mandates were. The CDC's guidance, I think, certainly could be interpreted to support the city's position. It could also have been cited to support a different conclusion.
All right, so I think my answer to them will be to call you, Wyatt.
That's fine, and that's what I've
Okay.
I've fielded a number of calls on this.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Mr. Duncan?
I'm 500 miles south of you all, so I just don't know. Is there any discussion in Northern Virginia of any jurisdiction devising some sort of verification process about vaccinations, or are we just literally relying on an honor system?
I've not heard of any jurisdiction doing anything other than the honor system.
Nor have I.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on this topic? So we do have a closed session momentarily. Before we get to that, are there any schedule? Ms. Hiscott, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up. My apologies.
I thought you were going into closed session, so I had just a couple of other issues I wanted to ask, raise.
Absolutely, of course.
Since I've been, in this great weather outside a lot, I've gotten several questions, complaints, worried comments from neighbors about the trail that goes from Gresham Place through to Van Buren Street. This is not the WNOD, but the kind of cinder path that's through there. There are two small signs that say, please dismount your bikes or no bikes on this trail. And we've had a lot of bikers cutting through there this spring. And, there's a park there with a lot of small kids. And so several people have asked me to raise this to council and to make sure our police know that in addition to the other comments that we've been getting on public safety on the WNOD trail, that this has been a concern for that area as well. Years ago when we had a bike officer, they would ride through there occasionally, and that seemed to tamp down many bikers going very quickly through there. But I'm wondering, in light of that, maybe we could add or think about looking at signage again for that stretch. It's a pretty short stretch, but lots of small children there. So that's just a request to add that to our list of public safety requests from citizens.
Yeah, thank you for laying that. We've gotten some of those requests directly as well, and Danny Schlitt, I think, is looking at the signage.
Excellent.
And
then the second is it's kind of public safety / city council / volunteer on the all night grad committee party. I know we've communicated on that, but from a city council perspective, I just wanted to make sure that we go through the proper channels with OCOM to make sure that businesses, people who would head to those businesses know that on the night of June 2nd between 7 and 11 that Park Place, State Theater parking lot, and the back parking lot of Clarendon's will be closed. I know we're working on all the other logistics, but I was just thinking today about making sure that city communications put something out about that as well, so people aren't surprised or startled or concerned about that, because we might all be tied into it with students graduating, but many may not. So I want to make sure that was also in our communications calendar. And that's it for now.
All right, thank you. So now, are there any other council comments or schedule requests before we go into closed session? And what we plan on doing on the closed session is going into closed session, doing the motion, and then taking a short break for the cameras to come down, and then we'll be in closed session and come back out just to certify and to come out of the closed session. Are there any other comments before we do the closed session motion? All right, I'm going to go ahead then and read the closed session motion. The time is 8:59. Upon a motion made by Council Member
Litkinez.
I'm going to go with Ross. and seconded by Councilmember.
Hardy.
Scott.
I'm going to go with Hardy that time. And passed by vote of City Council. Council went into closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1. Discussion, consideration of performance or salaries of specific public officers or appointees of any public body. Annual evaluations of city manager, city attorney, and city clerk. Vice Mayor Connolly,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Lichtenhouse,
Yes.
Hiscott,
Yes.
Snyder,
Yes.
Tartar, yep. All right, so we've gone into closed session. Let's take a 5-minute break and reconvene at 9:05 in closed session without anyone there, including you, Wyatt, and Celeste, and city attorney. And we'll do our thing and come on back out, hopefully pretty soon.
All right. Thank you, council. Good night.
All right. Thank you.
Mayor and Vice Mayor Connolly, we'll do like we did last time.
Left the city limits, so if I can just keep that record going. Rent a car if I ever need. Rent a car if I ever need to come down here.
Yep. Yep.
Well, thank you for coordinating this, Mary Beth. Doing a great job.
Thanks. Thanks for everyone's input.
Okay, Mayor, FCC TV is up, audio and video, so you can do your public meeting motions.
All right. Well, we're coming out of closed session. Thank you for your patience. If anyone, in fact, is still on watching, but we're going to come out of closed session and then make a certification. Upon a motion made by Council Member
Snyder.
Snyder, seconded by Council Member
Hardy. Scott.
Hardy. Let's take Hardy. And passed by vote of City Council. Council reconvene in open session. Vice Mayor Connolly.
Yes.
Duncan.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Lichtenhouse.
Yeah.
Hiscott.
Yes.
Snyder.
Yeah.
Tartar. Yep. All right. So it is 10:34. This is our certification upon a motion made by Council Member
Snyder.
Seconded by Council Member.
Yes, Scott.
All right. And passed upon affirmative roll call vote in open session, it was certified that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session or meeting by the body. Vice Mayor Connolly?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yeah.
Hiscott?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yeah.
Tartar? Yep. All right. Anything else anybody wants to say before we adjourn?
Move adjourn.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
All right. We're adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone.
All
Thank
right.
you. Good night.
Night.
See ya.
Goodbye, all.
Bye-bye.